Do you have a dream? Ling Yah Wong asked this provocative question in her first podcast episode, So This Is My Why. Hi, everyone. I'm Raymond, the host of Clocking Out. This podcast, it's dedicated to my mom, who showed me what courage really looks like when she took her own leap of faith to pursue career fulfillment. Today, we meet Ling Yah Wong, who was once a litigator at Malaysia's top law firm, and now she's the voice behind the podcast, So This Is My Why. For over a decade, Ling walked the path of prestige and stability, even as she quietly wondered whether practicing law was truly her calling. Then she stumbled into a new passion, podcasting, and in 2020, after a trip to Everest Base Camp, she made herself a personal promise. She would finally launch her own. That curiosity and courage opened up unexpected doors, and by 2023, Ling finally took the leap of faith, leaving law behind for good and embracing what she calls her year of yes. Ling's story, to me, it's a reminder that you just don't have to have everything figured out to start over. So without further ado, please enjoy Ling Yah Wong and her clocking out story. Ling, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me, Raymond.
I'm so excited about our conversation today. I was doing my research and I went in and listened to your podcast. So This Is My Why. Yeah. And I went back to episode 1 of 152 episodes.
Oh, wow.
Today.
That was a long time ago.
I know. I was scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and I finally got to it. And I always like, for somebody who launches a podcast, it is an evolution. And you had 152 episodes. I went back to episode 1, and I really wanted to understand what was the genesis of this podcast that you launched. And when I listened to it, I got chills because you led with a question. Do you have a dream? And it just gives me chills because everyone has a dream. And it's not until a certain point of your life that your dream becomes realized. And that sort of question connects with your why and why you started the podcast. And it's so cool because Clocking Out is a podcast about helping people identify when is the moment in your life when you're really wanting to lean into your why, and you have the courage to walk away from whatever it is that you're doing today to be able to make a change, to pursue your dream, pursue your why. And so I am just so delighted to have this conversation today. There's just so much overlap in the work that you're doing and my why and the work that I'm doing here. And so just really excited to share with our listeners your journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you for going all the way back to listen to episode 1. I have to say, I hope you were surprised by some of the sounds that were inserted at the start as well. I was with a wildlife vet, so it's a little bit more different, I think, compared to everyone else as well. But I love that episode because she was definitely one of those few people with such a clear dream, and she knew what she wanted. And not many people would say, I want to dedicate my life to looking after wildlife, animals, but she did. She knew it, and she's never regretted it, as you can tell as well.
Wow. So Ling, tell me, where did you grow up as a young girl?
I grew up in Borneo. It's East Malaysia, so that was like a small town, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And when you were young, we talked about, do you have a dream? Mm-hmm. What was your dream of what you wanted to be as a young girl? I know it couldn't have been a lawyer.
No, it couldn't have been a lawyer. I didn't have a specific dream. I wasn't one of those with a clear idea. I suppose the earliest one was I wanted to be like a jockey, but then I was always very tall even as a kid. So my parents kind of took me aside and said, look at the jockeys around you. They are actually a lot shorter than you. And there's a reason why they are all of a certain height. And so physically, I already knew that wasn't a possibility. And I kind of never really thought about what to do with my life. I just went on and just completed schools and all the classes I went for. It was only when I was at A levels that I was forced to actually think about it. But before that, no specific dream.
That's great. So what was it like growing up in Malaysia in terms of the culture, and what was your most memorable moment?
So in our culture where I was growing up, school was, well, where I went to was very, very long. It would take you from early morning, 7:30 all the way to 4. You would come back, you would shower, eat, then you go for extra tuition classes. That tends to take place pretty much every single day. I was also very active in music, and I learned 2 instruments. So it was either music classes or all the other extracurricular activities, or it was just rehearsals and performances. I would say it was a very, very packed schedule. And looking back, not many people have enjoyed it, but looking back, I'm glad I went through it, because that's having a sort of clear schedule and rigor to it is something that really helps me to, achieve and do things and be productive. So I'm not unhappy with that. But it's quite common, I would say, that kids growing up where I was at, you just have your days all planned out.
So here in the States, oftentimes we get the question early on, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you talked about being a jockey, and you sort of had that dream. And I feel like oftentimes people have dreams, but they're not necessarily what you ultimately will end up pursuing. I wonder, did your parents have any influence over what you studied in school or what you pursued as a degree?
No, I would say my parents are probably unusual in the sense that normally with Asian households, they would say you must be a lawyer, doctor, or engineer. They'd never, ever impose any such expectations, which is ironic because I ended up taking a very conventional course. All they did was tell me that no matter what, just do on your studies, because that is the most important thing. Just do really well, then the world's your oyster, but you must do well no matter what. And I would say that growing up, looking at my dad, I did go to his office sometimes. I just saw the work and the hours that he was doing. And while I didn't know what I wanted to do, I knew I didn't want to be an architect. That was for sure. Because I just couldn't imagine sitting down and just drawing buildings all day. And drawing and redrawing. And it just did not appeal. And I remember I would see him just drawing all these different structures. And I would go, but there are so many different rulers on your table. Why are you drawing these lines freehand? And he said, no, because that's the job. You're not supposed to not be able to draw a straight line. But for me, that just has always stayed on my mind. I just thought, no, this just doesn't appeal.
Was there, though, a desire to understand it and really determine whether that is a career that you wanted to take? But
just wasn't interested. Yeah. I just saw his work, his hours. I saw the people around them. They would install their, I think it was AutoCAD. That's the software on my laptop. Just didn't enjoy it. I have to say. Just didn't draw me for some reason. Because I think I'm always been drawn to things that are more story-driven, that's more literature-based, and which is why I thought law would be perfect, because it's all about reading and writing as opposed to, numbers and drawing.
So at what age did you decide you wanted to be a lawyer?
This is when I was doing A-levels, so this is around, I would say, age 18, thereabouts, 18, 19.
And where did you go to college to pursue your degree?
So I went to the London School of Economics, that's in London, and it's a 3-year degree. So I did that, and normally after that, you can't be a lawyer. You must do a course before that. And so I did the bar course, which is if you stay in the UK, you become a barrister, which is the person that goes to court. But I did the bar because for Malaysians, the solicitor route, which is when you work in a law firm, that's only recognized in the UK and not in Malaysia. So you do that only if you know you've got a job in the UK working in a law firm. But for me as a Malaysian, I knew I needed to do the bar so I can come back and I can go and work straight away for a law firm, which is what I did.
So you went to college in London, you sat for the bar in the UK, and that passing of the bar allowed you to practice law back in Malaysia. Did you
Yeah.
have to also take a bar in Malaysia as well?
No, no,
Oh,
that's the
wow.
bar. Yeah. If I had not done that, then I would have had to do it in Malaysia, but I didn't.
Interesting. So how does that work, though? I would imagine that, British law is different than law
Because
in Malaysia.
Malaysian law is based off the UK law.
It is. Okay.
So that's why when we look at case law when we're in court, we will reference Malaysian law. That's always the primary source. But when you are dealing with cases that are a lot wider and more varied, then you start looking to, say, Singapore, you definitely start looking towards the UK because our law is very similar to the UK. It's just that it's probably outdated. So for instance, the Copyright Act, I think it was 1950s. Our version is still the old version, whereas the UK's already amended it, and it's ahead of us. But yeah, it's things like that.
So what was your first job back in Malaysia working as a lawyer?
I was working as a litigator at Wong and Partners, which is a member firm of Baker McKenzie. It's a U.S. law firm. So I was there as a litigator.
What did you love about the job?
What I loved is that when because it's part of the Baker McKenzie network, you get access to lots of amazing jobs and the biggest names when it comes to clients. There is no way you have never heard of them. The names that come to mind are the names that we worked for. And you get a lot of responsibility at the very start, I would say. So I was very, very lucky. I got to work with the principals. I got to handle cases straight away just because of the way that the human resource management was working at that time. And I love the fact that I was doing IP litigation, so intellectual property, which is essentially two departments. And I was the only one that belonged to, the only one of a small handful that belonged to two departments at once. So I'm part of the litigation department. I have access to all of their regional talks and, trips and trainings, but also in a part of the IP department, I have similar access to all those things as well, which is really, really great, I would say. And it's really nice to be handling the cases as opposed to be helping a senior to work on a case. They're just very, very different things, I would say. And you get that kind of trust and responsibility from day one.
That's great. So when you reflect back, Ling, to the moment when you started working at this law firm, did you feel like that your life was set in terms of this is your career, this is going to be your identity as an attorney? Was there any internal struggle that you were really unsure at the time that, is this really me? Or I just wonder how you felt around the future of yourself as a lawyer.
I would say I never felt like law was for me looking back. And I just didn't have the awareness at the time to question further. Even when I was studying law, it already did not feel like the right fit. But then I thought it was just one of those things where you just work harder, just push through it. So I thought again when I was working in a law firm, well, it's pretty much the best law firm in the whole of Malaysia. It doesn't get any better. You get all the resources, regional, global support that no other law firm offers in Malaysia. How can you not enjoy this? I would say I definitely enjoyed my first year or so there because it was all very, very new. I had access on a level that I never had before, that most people did not have. And we were just doing lots of interesting cases. I was just not just going to court. I was being able to be a part of the enforcement work. So you would work with police officers. You would, make sure that you have no brands on you, get into a nondescript car, drive to a mall that's full of people selling counterfeits and raid these places. And it's just, you think it's part of a movie, but somehow you're suddenly a part of it. And it's very interesting and very fun, I would say. But along the way, then I started to realize that I could not see myself doing it for the rest of my life. That was a clear thing. I would be working to 10, 11 p.m. every single day. I would be coming in maybe on the weekends as well. I would see certainly our principals coming in on the weekend, and they are working just as hard, not harder than all of us. And I remember like some of my principals, they would be doing regional flights. They've been gone for 1 week. The moment they land, they come to the office. Even if they're sick and you can hear them coughing all the way down the corridor, they're still in the office and they're spending the whole day, the whole weekend there. And I found myself thinking, do I want to be that person? Because they are the best at what they do. And I thought, no, I just don't want to be you. Unfortunately, it is a very clear thing for me. But that realization happens, I would say, slowly. But when I look back really deep down, I always knew I wasn't the right fit. I just, I guess, was afraid to acknowledge it.
Uh-huh. I appreciate you sharing that. You said something that really struck me with you just grit, you grind, you persevere. And there's an instinct there where it's someone like you at such a young age, where you're working for the most prestigious law firm, highly educated, and you're working around some of the smartest attorneys in the world. And you had this feeling like, this is not me, but your instinct initially is, I should just grit, I should grind, I should be grateful for this opportunity. Because at some point, there's going to be the success that you're going to be like these others. But you had this internal feeling that this isn't me. And I wonder, how long did that last before you actually said, like, did you really grind for some period of time? And how did that feel? And ultimately, what did you do about it?
I mean, it took me 10 years to accept that it wasn't for me. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that my identity was so wrapped up as a lawyer. I couldn't accept the possibility that I wasn't going to be one. What does that even mean? What does that look like? And especially when everyone around me is a lawyer and they have no intention of leaving or doing anything else, how can I not be able to do this was a very big question. But then I also thought, I just really don't enjoy this. I really, really don't. And I see lots of people who are lawyers, who are still lawyers, but they are always bitching about work and clients and the people they work for. And they are leaving one law firm to join another and another. And then when I ask them, why are you quitting? Why are you joining another law firm? They would just say, I don't know. I'm just giving it a go. There's no clear plan. There is no reason why they're leaving for another. It's just, it doesn't feel quite right. So I'm just going to go for another one, which felt like it wasn't a route that I wanted to take. I didn't want to be that person who just quits because it doesn't feel right to join another when there's no clarity on why you're doing it. It's really that, I would say. And ultimately, looking back, it took me about 10 years before I decided that not only was this not for me, but I was ready to take the leap. And the reason it took so long is, firstly, I had to overcome the idea that I was not going to be a lawyer at some point. And secondly, to figure out what that something else was. Because that was also my big issue. When people asked me, it wasn't a secret, I didn't enjoy law. And people will always then ask the second follow-up question, which is, so what do you want to do? And I would always say, I don't know. Which for me was the most absurd thing, because I thought, well, if I don't know, no one else can help me. They can have the best resources, the best jobs, but if I don't know what I want, they can't help or give me that access and that, first step in. So I was stuck for a very, very long time, and that's why I started the podcast, because I thought, if I don't have the answer, maybe someone else out there does. So why don't I just talk to anyone in the world doing pretty much anything? I wouldn't limit to a particular industry. And the goal is always just learn and learn and learn, to deep dive into their lives, to reverse engineer, and try and learn so much about them that I feel at some point that I know their lives as well as they do, if not even better. Because if I can step into their shoes, then surely I can understand not only how they reached their success, but why, and was that path, that journey even worth it? And if I collect enough of those stories, I can step into enough shoes, surely clarity for myself will come as well. Because I would think, can see the principles, the values that people are looking through, and surely those are the guiding lights for me to figure out what to do with my own life.
Mm-hmm. Ling, that is so inspiring. I love that. I love how you stepped into uncertainty and realized that the answer will come over time. that it wasn't just going to come overnight. I have to ask, when you called your parents and told them that being a lawyer is just not for me and I'm going to go down this journey of figuring out my why, what was their reaction to that?
I didn't specifically say I was going down this journey to figure out my why, but they always knew I never enjoyed law. They always knew I was never quiet about it. And I think when you hear your daughter say for 10 years that I just don't enjoy law, and they also see that I was putting a lot of time, a lot of work into this outside job that wasn't paying at the time, but some of it was, then there comes that thought of when I finally said, okay, I'm ready to take the plunge. To my surprise, admittedly, they didn't have an issue. They just went, all right, sure, you've decided, go for it. And I think it's because they looked at me and I thought, well, it's not like I didn't give law a go. I gave it 10 years. Surely after 10 years, you would know whether it's for you or not. If it's not for you, then it's time to move on.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense because even over the 10 years, you've accumulated so much experience. So it's not like those are 10 years lost. It really allowed you to do soul searching in terms of really tapping into who you are. What is your identity? Because at the core, once you really have clarity around your identity, it allows you to see who you are and whatever it is that next thing is. When the universe says, Ling, this is who you are, this is where you're meant to be, you know, having that 10 years allows you to just have precise clarity on what it is you know you don't want to do, but also when the thing comes, it's so clear as to what it is. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was a journey, but a lot of uncertainty, a lot of angst, I would say. I mean, it looks, it's so easy when you look back now, but at the time it wasn't. There was no clarity.
So I wonder, when did you start working on the podcast? Was that when you were practicing law? And I just wonder, at what point did you decide that you were going to give time to start working on this other thing? And sort of how did you navigate that?
So I first discovered there was this thing called a podcast in 2019. And when I say discover, I mean I never heard about it before that point. So when I listened, I remember to my first podcast episode, at the end, the host would always say, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And I remember thinking, what does that mean? How do you subscribe? On what platform? I had no clue. So from there, when I first heard it and I realized how powerful a medium it was almost like a natural next step of course I have to start one. And I thought of that because I thought, firstly, I'm learning so much more than I could possibly learn when I'm Googling something. Because when you Google, it's just very generic, common information. You go down to page 5 and it's nothing there. Whereas with a podcast, if you find a good one and you really like it and you follow it, you learn so much every single episode all the time. So then I found myself thinking, look, this is a powerful medium. The fellow my best friends are learning so much. And we will always be stuck in traffic. There will always be this downtime where you can't read or do anything apart from just playing something. So do you really want to be just playing a song or listen to a radio chat show? Or do you want to be learning? I think the learning part would be very, very powerful. And there would definitely be people who want it, but there are not that many options, certainly not in this part of the world when it comes to learning from our perspective with our kind of cultural context. So for me, it just felt inevitable. This is a powerful medium. I'm learning so much. I'm sure there are lots of people out there. There is a gap in the market. It's always a first mover advantage, which is right now, just start. So I started it, but I also only started in 2020 because I knew I was going to climb Everest Base Camp at the start in March. And I figured, well, once you start, you should not stop. So you should do it after you've done that big climb, which is what I did.
Wow. So tell me about the climb. What inspired you to take that on? That's no small feat.
It was just one of those things where I did my first climb in Mount Kinabalu, which is in East Malaysia. And I first ever hiked and never done it before in my life. And I found myself really enjoying it. And at some point, when I was almost to the peak and I was above the clouds, I looked around and I just thought, you know what? People always talk about Everest Base Camp. I'm just going to do it. And I had no clue what it was about. Never met anyone who did it. I'm just that kind of person where an idea comes to my head and I would just go, I'm just going to do it. And I figured with me, I need to set a deadline for myself. If I don't do it at a certain point, I would never do it. So I thought to myself, I got to do it before 10:30, which was my April 2020. And I had a friend who happened to reach out to say, we're doing a hike to Everest Base Camp in March 2020. So do you want to do it? So I said, of course, it feels like all the stars are aligned. Let's do it. But the funniest thing is that after I did Everest Base Camp, and then I was back in Kathmandu, the next day, the airports were shut, all the airlines were down because it was COVID. So then it became this epic journey where door to door, I was away for 40 days. Because not only were we hiking, we were also stuck in Kathmandu. Then we got back. We were the only people to arrive at KLIA, which is our international airport. Then everyone just shuttled us to the hotel to have our own, quarantine period before I got back home. So it was a whole journey in the end. There was more than just a hike. But it was also really great because we were one of the last ones to get to hike, whereas everyone else no longer could exercise their license because they were shutting down because of COVID. But we managed to get through. So unlike everyone else before and after COVID, where it's very commercialized, it's always packed, you sometimes have to line up and queue when you're walking, the mountains were for us. It was empty, and it was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. It sounds like you had the opportunity to not only accomplish this hike, but also it gave you opportunity to really think about your life and the meaning of your life. And how long did it actually take you to get to base camp?
I can't remember now. I think it was less than 10 days, I would say. We had to cut short our hike, but we definitely hit Everest Base Camp. And then after that, we went back down straight.
10 days.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. I think anyone who's remotely interested should just do it because it's not that hard, to be honest. It's just a long walk that you're doing consistently for about 2 weeks.
Wow. That's incredible. So tell me about this transition from the podcast. So you launched the podcast while you were working, practicing law. It's during COVID. When was the moment when you said, I'm walking away from the legal profession altogether and you're going to do this 100%?
It was a long, long time because when I started the podcast, I knew the podcast is the worst medium to start off with because it's not like any other platform or format where you could go viral, you could build really, really fast. I knew podcast is a thing that goes deep and it makes sense only if you have an audience. I had no audience whatsoever. I was just pursuing my interests and having that excuse to network with people. And for a long time, for many, many years, I found myself questioning and going, what's the point of me doing this? Should I be doing this? Because I'm spending all my time outside work working on this thing, which is not going anywhere. It's not getting any sponsors. I know it's not going to get anything anytime soon because getting at least 100,000 downloads per episode is really, really hard. So where am I going? Am I wasting my time? But then that turning point came because as I was building this podcast, I had to figure out how do I promote this? And I was looking all around and I thought, this podcast is all about career development, personal development. It is at least an hour to an hour and a half long. It's very serious. It's very in-depth. Who on earth will enjoy listening to something like this? Probably the professionals on LinkedIn who are all about career development, personal development, and are very ambitious as well. They want to hear what the CEOs are saying, how they got to where they are. So I decided to focus on just that platform, figure it out right just for that platform and see where it went. And I was very lucky because within a week, one post went viral, then another, then another. And that's when the turning point started to come because people will notice when you're doing well. And then people would then say, I really like the way you think. It's very different. I also would like to do this, but I don't have the time. I have no interest in doing this, but I know I need to be here. I need someone that I can trust to take this off my plate so I never have to think about it, but still have that tick in the box, if you will. So then I started to come in. I said, sure, let me give this a go. Let me see if there is an actual demand. It felt like there was. And there was. So at some point, I decided I was just going to take a risk because it's reached a point where there were people coming to me. And it also reached a point where at the start of that year, I looked at that year, 2023, and I thought, I cannot imagine still doing law until the end of 2023. I just could not. It just felt like an overwhelming thing. And it was still really hard. I struggled. I sat on it. I gave it a month and a two. I was thinking maybe I should just send in my notice in November. And I went, no. Maybe I should do it in December. No, maybe I should do it after Chinese New Year in February when we get our bonus. So I kept on delaying it over and over and over again. But finally, that turning point of after the bonus, then I decided I would just do it, because if I would never do it now, then I will never do it.
Wow. That's incredible. I feel the struggle.
Yeah.
The struggle back and forth.
I mean, it's
And
crazy
think-
it's crazy when I look back and I go, why did I struggle? There was no struggle. There should be. By the time the struggle was real.
Yeah.
So you were saying.
Yeah, no, it's totally real, and there's this sort of unraveling that you have to do with all the things that were built up, right? Like, you put a lot of time and effort into your education, your career, your experience, the people that you work with and the people that you work for. You know, there's all of these forces that keep you grounded in this career that you've pursued for over a decade. And the idea of just turning it off and walking away from that and leaning into this new dream that you felt called to pursue, the weight of that becomes greater than the weight of what you were giving up. And it's at that moment that you feel the pull that is so much bigger. And it's like, okay, this is time. And that feeling is different, I feel like, for every person, in terms of, you know, what's the breaking point? What's the moment where the universe says it's time? And I hear there's a meltdown in the parking lot on a Friday afternoon when some event happens at work. Sometimes it's actually an event that, you know, is the catalyst, but then it's oftentimes the opportunity, you know, that opportunity that is in front of you. And so, super interesting.
Was there a turning point for you as well? A meltdown turning point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're wearing your podcast hat now?
Yeah. It's like, should I ask a question? Let me ask a question.
Yeah, it was a similar scenario where it was in 2008, and I was working in a corporate HR job, and I decided to go off on my own. And ultimately what I ended up doing is going to my company and asking if I could work as a consultant for a period of time while I was launching my business. And so the safety net for me was, the risk was going to my boss in the company, who really valued my work. And so I felt like the worst that they could say is no, good luck. But I felt like I had some leverage, and they would take me up on that offer and allow me to hire my replacement, work as a consultant. They knew I had already started sort of forming the business and created a website. So there was some work that I did similar to you, where I was kind of starting my company before I left. But then it was about, I'd say, a year of working as a consultant before I completely broke away.
How did you know it was the right time to break away, though?
That is a story for another day.
Yeah, but it's always that, I'm not sure.
Yeah. There was a very similar moment. It wasn't crying in the parking lot, I'll tell you, but there was certainly, I will say, it was the recession of 2008, which ultimately forced me to change the business. And that's when it became clear what the new business was going to be, which gave me a lot of confidence in the direction of the company.
Yeah. And final question, looking back, do you feel like it was the right time?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting, Ling, because you said at the time it wasn't clear.
Yeah.
But as I look back, it was absolutely clear. Like when you see all of the things that occurred over the last 18 years, they were all building blocks of ultimately where I am today. So,
Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah. Hindsight 2020.
it really is. And I would be living with a lot of regret if I stayed with the company and I didn't make the decision to clock out.
Yeah, I agree as well. I can't
Hmm.
imagine not having clocked out and can't imagine not having quit my job. But at the time, it was inconceivable. And I thought I was insane. I really delayed for so many months. Now I look back and I go, why on earth were you scared? You should have just done it.
Hmm.
But it was
Yeah.
still the right time.
Yeah. It's so interesting. So tell me, what are you up to today in terms of the the podcast? So this is my why. How is that a business? And tell me more about, the company and how are you adding value to your customers and your followers?
Yeah. So ultimately, when I look at this, so this is my why. In a way, the mission has never deviated because even though it was a very personal journey, I learned as I was doing this and as I'm still doing this that so many people on that same journey. So many people are questioning themselves. They are the best people at their jobs, but then they will go, is this it? Isn't there something else out there? And then it's a question of even if there is something else out there, even though I love my job, but there needs to be something more. It's always a question of how do you get to that other level? And so the only way you can get to the other level, which is something we are not taught in Asia at least, is you gotta sell yourself. You gotta be able to just walk up to anyone and say, this is who I am, and this is why you should talk to me because I'm pretty great at what I do without sounding very obnoxious. That's just something that people just don't do. Even the idea of walking up to someone and sending a cold email terrifies people. And I realized that without even being intentional about it, that's precisely why I've been doing this all the time. Cold emailing people from CEOs to say ex-convicts to four-star generals and US congressmen. It's never been an issue for me. And people really look up to that. People really want to learn that as well as how to tell their story. So all these main themes are present, which is why the podcast is still going because I'm still very intrigued. I still want to learn how other people are building their lives and have that network. But also doing more events as well because lots of people who listen, they would then go, I want to meet other people. I feel some doubts. I don't know how to make new friends. And when they come together because they all listen to the same podcast, you likely have the same kind of values and you'll likely hit it off. So every time I've done it, I will always tell them you're only here for 2 hours and they always stay for at least 4. And I go, I think that's a sign. If you
Hmm.
want to stay for 4 hours and so many of you will come out and say, I'm an introvert and I never stay for long, but I stay for 4 hours. Or after that, you will go, it's been 4 hours, but we want to get dinner. Do you want to come? And I'll go, okay, you're not sick of each other. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad to hear. So, but that's that thing as well, bringing people together as a community, building that community, but also teaching people as well, how do you put yourself out there? Don't just listen to other people tell their stories, learn how to tell your stories as well. And if there's one, and rather than trying to do that for everyone, I focus just on the professionals, just on LinkedIn. So while there's the podcast and while there's the events, there's also a LinkedIn personal brand as well. So there are two parts. There is the course, which caters to people who want to learn, but they want to do it themselves. But then there are those who are a lot more senior, who are mid to senior executives, who would come and they are the people who would say, I don't need to be on LinkedIn. I just don't have the time, no interest in learning. I just want someone to do it and have it done. So those are the people that I do one-on-one intensively with. And so that's just something that I've been building. And I'm also working on the book as well because I've had publishers reach out to me and it feels like the right time. There's so many stories I already have. Just need to sit down and just put it all together.
I love this sort of the visual I have as a puzzle where you have these three components. You have the podcast, which is an incredible content engine that you've created well before you actually left law. It sounds like it was like over 2 years where you were just building up a library of content from individuals and sharing their story to creating this community of bringing people together in these events. And then ultimately, you've created so much value in this content that people are now coming to you as sort of an advisor for you to help them sort of create their own sort of why and identity and share with the world. And I just love how you've evolved, where you didn't start with the business of trying to advise. You had to become the expert essentially on your own. And I just love that evolution. What was your biggest challenge did you find early on, even after starting the podcast? What would you say were some of the biggest challenges you had to overcome?
The biggest challenge, and it's still a challenge now, is figuring out that exact fit. I think that's the thing I struggle with the most. Because it's a question of why would people listen to this podcast? There's so many podcasts right now. There's so many of them. They're diving deep into what you're doing, your why, this one as well. Why on earth would they listen to me and not somebody else? Because these guests I have on, it's not like they have never been featured elsewhere. Some have never, but a lot of them have been as well. It's figuring that exact fit and figure out exactly how, I guess, just to make it memorable and make it the best form it can be. Look at people like Steve Bartland. He has a whole team and they have all specialized in so many different parts just to run the podcast. He has one that is just the head. That's literally the title of that person's like job title, head of failures and experimentation. There's one person who's in charge of just creating trailers. And it's just, for me, how can they not be great if you have one person focused on just one little part where data is the center of everything they do and you really understand and you really experiment. So I don't have that team, don't have the kind of resources that Steve has, but it doesn't mean you can't also do something similar on a smaller scale to at least try and figure out that right fit. So for me, that's the struggle, I would say. And maybe a second one, even though you said one, it's really learning to let go. That's something I need to really, really learn because it's been quite a while. And obviously the next level up when you're doing something by yourself is not to do everything yourself, but to get someone to come in. But the letting go is really hard for me. I've tried here and there, but it's never been something I'm comfortable with. But I recognize that I just have to learn. And I feel that once I do it, I will never look back because I can't imagine not having someone else do the work for me not having to do everything. But I'm still at that point where I haven't managed to get over that bridge, so I'm stuck. So I'm here, but hopefully I will be on the other side soon.
Yeah, I appreciate your vulnerability there. I think that early on, when you're curating your baby and you're bringing something new to the world, having control over every aspect, I can completely relate and appreciate that. And I think that is the entrepreneur's dilemma. You know, when you're building a business and you're running every aspect, at what point, when is that inflection point where in order for it to really scale and get to what you just described is the podcast that you aspire to be, at some point you have to start delegating some of those things. And so I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, I know. And I'm sure there are lots of people who have gone over to the other side and go, oh, it's so easy. You should just do it now.
So, Ling, what advice would you give someone who is in a similar situation as you, where they're in a job and they're having that sort of struggle that you experienced when you were a lawyer, in the buildup of what they've accomplished in their education and their experience and all the things that we talked about? What one piece of advice would you give someone who knows in the bottom of their heart that they are ready to lean into their why and really what they've dreamt that they want to be? What advice would you give them?
I would say, and this is very much founded on my own experience, looking back, what really changed everything for me was when I just did something that was different. I never done a podcast before. It was something that was different, but I committed to, and I knew I wanted to do it for a long term. And I wasn't expecting overnight success. I told myself, it doesn't matter if nothing happens, give it a go and do this for at least 3 years before you start to really question yourself. Because I felt, based on my research, for everyone out there who's ever put in a lot of effort into something, no matter how silly it is or how people don't care about it, if you put 3 years of consistent effort into it, something will happen. things will turn for you and things will open up. That happened to me within the 3-year mark. I mean, throughout first year, second year, all the way to third, I thought nothing's happening. There's no way I could change my life. No way I could find a job, get a job, build a job, nothing. And then at that 3rd-year mark, suddenly the doors open and I realized, oh, there is a career here that I can build for myself. But ultimately, it's because I did something different. But when you don't know and you're going further back, you don't know what exactly that thing is. But if you're at that stage where I have no idea what I'm interested in, I have no idea what skills I have or what skills I want to develop. If you are completely a blank slate, then I'll say listen to stories, because that was my big issue looking back. I realized that I didn't have friends doing different things that I would sit down and ask and grill for an hour going, but why are you doing what you're doing and how did you get there? And are you actually happy? But because I was listening for podcasts for at least a year, I was listening to stories of people who were starting up bakeries or selling, doing car washes, like random businesses and industries in countries I have never been to and doing work I know I would never want to do. But because I listen to so many and I can see the entire journey, at some point you start to realize that everyone who's successful are not really in the way that great or really that special. In a way, they would share all the different stories and mistakes, and I'll find myself thinking, I've never done what you do, but I can't believe you made that mistake. So at some point you start to go, maybe I'm not so bad. Maybe if I put myself out there, then maybe it will work out, because I now know all the mistakes that I should not do, plus all the mistakes I know I would never do if I was in your situation. I'm sure I would still make lots of mistakes after, but surely it can't be so bad. If all these many people figured it out and made it, surely I can too. But that confidence, that realization, and that ideas in terms of what to do, that first step came only because I started listening to stories of different people. So if you are truly a blank slate, listen to podcasts like this one that we're on right now. Listen to many different stories, read autobiographies, talk to people. Just be a sponge. You don't have to have a goal. Just be curious and ask them why. Why are you here? What do you do? What do you do? And are you happy?
Well, I love that. That's such great advice. I think so many people spend so many hours in a day doing activities that aren't adding value. And I heard someone say that this is a radical idea, but for someone who loves watching television or social media, they literally put a whiteboard in front of their television with their dreams written out. And in order for you to see the TV, you'd have to move the whiteboard away from the television. And
I love that.
And it's almost like you're putting your dreams aside so you can binge watch something on Netflix or Hulu. And it's a very, like I said, it's a very radical sort of example. But if you think about what you just described, where you're listening to a podcast where you're hearing stories of individuals, there's so many out there that are very well done, that provide inspiration and give you ideas. And it kind of creates a way for you to sort of visualize how you react as your emotion to the various things. And then over time, it gives you clarity as to what is your why. And so kind of leaning into that, I feel like it's such a great piece of advice. And today, for people who drive 45 minutes to work, or, are spending time on the road, or even, stuck in traffic somewhere, listening to a podcast is a great way to start for you to sort of stimulate your mind as a first step. And it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, that's the thing. And some of the best stories, the best, as you said earlier, the best content is completely free. You don't need to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ling, I wanted to also wrap up with something else that I read online, and it's on your LinkedIn profile. And you said 2025 is the year of saying yes. And I just think that is so incredible, because it's intentional. You are saying to the world that you're leading with yes. Now, there's a challenge to that because sometimes you have to sort of be thoughtful about the yeses, because then you can get so consumed with things that you're not focused, so I think there's a caveat to that. But when you say that 2025 is the year of yes, what that says to me is that you're curious, you're open to exploring and learning new things, because ultimately that is going to bring growth in who you are as a professional. And I love that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad. Thank you.
So, Ling, we're going to provide all of your information in our notes in terms of how to get in touch with you. Any final thoughts?
No, not at all. I mean, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Raymond, for, the opportunity to share. And I hope that this inspires someone to at least take that one step, even if it's to listen to another episode on this podcast or to reach out to someone. I feel that we always I have that problem as well. We focus on those big successes and achievements, and we always forget that it's the tiny little steps that you forget, honestly, 5 years, 10 years later, that really changes everything for you. Because if you take the tiny steps and you just keep taking those tiny steps, they build up. And before you know it, blink your eyes and you go, I'm here. I quit my job and I'm living on the other side of the world and I'm being paid way more than I ever could as a corporate lawyer. And everyone's thinking, you're insane. And I'll go, no, you're insane for still staying there. But you never know if you don't take that step.
Absolutely. That's so well said. And I think that the work that you and I are doing together is helping people identify their why and having the courage to take that next step. And so really appreciate our conversation today. And I'm just so grateful for this time we spent together.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me, Raymond.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for listening. Until next time.
Hello, everyone. It's Raymond again here. I want to take a moment to say a special thanks to our sponsor, Career Minds. They're a global provider of career transition and career development solutions. And if you'd like to hear more on Clocking Out, we'd love for you to take a second and click follow of your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a rating or review. It really helps new listeners find the show. You can also watch the full episode on YouTube. Just search Clocking Out with Raymond Lee and hit subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to check out our episode polls or just drop us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Finally, if you or someone you know has a story to share about navigating change, taking a risk, or rethinking your career, we want to hear from you. Head to the link in our show notes and fill out the form to be considered for a future episode. Until next time, remember, if you're just sitting there thinking that you're stuck or you're unsure of your career or future and you think it's time for a change, I would encourage yourself to ask these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? Am I doing the things that genuinely matter to me most? Am I creating value for myself and for others? Until next time.